Welcome to the Fave podcast, the fourth edition. I'm your host, Stan Garfield. And in each edition, we have a special guest. And today, I have a very special guest, and it's my brother, David Garfield. David, welcome to the podcast.
Hello there. Hi, everyone.
I start out by talking a little bit about how we met. In this case, it's a little bit interesting because when we met, I don't really remember it. It was back in 1956. I was only 3 years old at the time, so I don't have any really strong memories of when you were brought home from the hospital or of any other activities really for the first few years. But then my memories kind of kick in when we moved to Omaha in 1957. And then as we got to be sort of constant companions and best buddies and hanging out and doing things together over the years, it's kind of evolves from there. But in any case, I don't really recall too much about your babyhood, but I remember you as my little buddy a few years later.
Well, when we moved to Omaha in 57, I would have been less than 1 year old.
That's right. That's right. So you didn't immediately come around with me playing, but at some point you did. So let me start out with some questions about your background, some of which obviously I will know and will have in common, but for our listeners, we'll fill them in. So when and where were you born?
Evanston, Illinois in September of 1956, Cook County.
And where have you lived over your life?
Well, we did the first year in Evanston, then 6 years in Omaha, Nebraska, 1 year in St. Louis in the Clayton, which was a suburb, then 6 years in Tenafly, New Jersey, a suburb of New York, and then back to St. Louis for 4 years for high school. And upon graduating high school, I fled to Los Angeles, October of 1974, and I'm coming up on 51 years out here.
So I assume you've liked living in California. You've stayed out there. Has that been a great place for you?
It's a wonderful place. It's one of the most amazing places on earth. It's just, it's changed a lot in all this time. But when I came out in the 70s, it was really special. It was a very special time. Um, and very laid back, very friendly, very open. But over these years, people have just diverged here from every part of the world, and it's a thriving, bustling place, crowded. People are impatient on the road. Nobody wants to let you in or
Well,
move over, make room. If you're going down a street that has room for two cars, most people are driving in the middle, and they don't get that they got to move over.
when you first got to LA from St. Louis as a long time Midwesterner and part-time East Coast guy, what was it like? Did it feel very different to you?
Not too much. There was a little bit of difference because some of the kids, had the whole surfer thing, like, which I didn't understand. But like, you would hear guys talk about surfers, or they would mimic surfer talk. But then you realize that there was surfing people that lived in more of the beach communities. Then you had people that lived more inland that liked to surf that would go out to the beach to surf, and so there would be California's own version of West Side Story, different, the valley people and the beach people. And I don't think they were fighting and rumbling, but there was, I know that I heard a lot of stuff about surfers and the beach, and that was different. But people were very friendly. One of the things I can tell you that I noticed is coming from the East, that anybody that's grown up in LA, wherever they went to high school, where they grew up, is very much stamped into their identity. You can really tell people that are from, like, say, Pacific Palisades, or people that are from South Bay, or from Hollywood, Beverly Hills, the East Side, San Gabriel Valley. Everybody had, and so from St. Louis, it was different. Like, I kind of blended with everybody, and I noticed that the people that grew up here kind of identified with where they were from culturally, just a lit.
Now, you've lived in several different parts of LA. Where all have you lived in your years there?
Well, my first month, I stayed with a buddy in Playa del Rey, which is, I think it's very close to where your daughter Kathy lives now, very walking distance. I stayed there for a month. And then I moved over to Inglewood, which was the family home of a friend of a friend's, and they offered me a room, a very tiny bedroom there. I was there for about 6 weeks. And then on Christmas Eve of 1975, sorry, Christmas Eve of 1974, I moved into my first apartment. It was a single apartment in Burbank, very close to the studios. And I was there for a while. Then I moved to West Hollywood in 76, before it became so thriving like it is now. And it was more of a sleepy town. And I moved down to West Hollywood there for 6 years. Then I moved to the Valley. And I've been in, oh, no, and then I moved from the Valley down to Los Feliz and then back to the Valley. But I kind of like the Valley for a lot of different reasons. You want to know why?
Yeah.
It's the greatest place to launch a journey from. Where I live, you can take off in any different direction to get any number of places. Where if you lived like in one of those places, but then to get in other places, it's really difficult. So it's a good location.
Are there different vibes in those different parts that you've lived in?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've seen a lot of places change over the years, like neighborhoods have transformed. Like when I lived in West Hollywood, it was unincorporated county, wasn't part of the city. They had sheriffs there, and it was very kind of sleepy. And then over time, they tore down some of the small buildings and built giant buildings. It became part of the city, I believe, and it became a big center for design and a lot of the different things related to that. But you look at certain places like Highland Park, and in 76 it was a small, very blue collar kind of a gang area, not safe. And now it's like Greenwich Village.
So when you were growing up, who all was in your family, which I should know? And secondly, who did you recall from your extended family seeing as you grew
Well, I think I either had two or three siblings. I can't remember now.
up?
I'm the youngest of four. You're next. And then above you is Joan, and then the oldest is Anne. So the four of us were the siblings, and then our mom and dad. The six of us could fit into a station wagon at one time. I think you and I would be in the very back, facing out, and extended family. We have all kinds of extended family, but I remember really, really liking my grandparents when I was little. My dad's parents, who would visit from Chicago. They come on the train or whatever. They were fairly close. Come, they'd bring treats, and always fun eating. I mean, that's where I started to love eating, was when my grandmother visited. I think she's the one to blame. Chicken soup, making matzo balls. She'd make gefilte fish in there. She'd make kugel, coffee cakes, cookies, you name it, probably brisket. But my radar was the cinnamon coffee cakes, and the side of it was very gooey. And the best part of the cake was the side where oh boy, I would just hang out in the kitchen and listen to my grandmother and smell the smells. But she had siblings, and her brother Al was, a very colorful character, had been in the Sino-Soviet War. His real name was Ellis. I believe he was older than Grandma.
Yep.
And then she had some other brothers, one that we didn't ever know until recently. There's a whole story about that. They live in California. The story was her brother Sam got into business with her husband, and from what I'm deducing, our grandfather may not have been the most easy person to get along with, and that he may have passed that on to our father. But there's something about their business thing went awry, but what happened with Sam's son, who was also Saul, just like our dad. He went into the Air Force or something like that, and he ended up in San Diego, like in the winter, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been living in Chicago all my life." He immediately got his family and moved to the West Coast. Like a lot of people didn't know that there was non-Arctic winters that you could find. So, but there was that whole branch of the family. Grandma had a whole bunch of siblings, but we really only knew Al And there was a brother that was in South America that you met. He made a big impression on you. You raved about him the first several years of my life. It was like I never got to meet this guy. But he was in Argentina. There's a lot of stories about our family. My mom's side, we had six girl cousins, one in between us. She was like an adopted sister, and they were all kind of sisters to us. And they had their, so a lot. I mean, I go on and on about our family. We got so many relatives there. My mom had a sister and a brother, and they had kids, and then everybody's had kids. So now I have seven nieces and nephews and 11 great nieces and great nephews.
Now, our dad's sister Helen used to tell a story about you that I don't know if it was true or not. Maybe you remember it. She claimed that she
On
came
the
in the kitchen and you were sitting on top of the refrigerator.
Yeah, I got paid 10 cents an hour to do that. To protect my dad, anything of my dad's. No, she always told this story, but I like to climb. I always like to climb and explore. So I must have climbed up on top of the refrigerator. And then I must have learned early on that you just don't go in the refrigerator and take anything because a cruel and horrible death could await you. I guess dad was, I guess he'd have something in there. I must have heard it early. Must have had like a half a corned beef sandwich or a glass of buttermilk or something, or some herring or something in the refrigerator that he was planning on eating. And then if somebody else got it and he opened the fridge, he wasn't good about that. He didn't just go, oh, well, I'll run down to the store and get some more. Dad wasn't a run down to the store kind of person, as you know.
Well, you have a great love of eating in delis, and so did he. Do you think you got that from him?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, his father, they would come home from the deli with the brown paper bags, and you could smell it. They'd open the door, and you'd smell corned beef and pastrami and onion bagels and lox.
So, what did your parents do?
Well, before we go into it, I'm just going to say something.
Yeah.
I learned a long time in life, growing up with deli food, thinking that that was Jewish food. None of that stuff is really Jewish food. It was picked up like pastrami comes from Turkey, and the smoked salmon. Oh, it's giving me a thumbs up. And the smoked salmon stuff comes from like Scotland and Ireland, and just different places. They kind of picked up the local goods. But anyway, back to what did my parents do? You don't know?
I think I know, but I'd be
Oh,
interested
you
in hear what
hear
you
it.
say.
I hate to break it to you. Um, our father was a psychologist, and he was always upgrading his job. He'd have a job, and then he'd get another job, and he'd get another job, and that's why we moved all the time. He was all interested in getting better jobs, and I assume more pay. I'm assuming that's part of it, and he liked to write. He considered himself a scholar and a scientist and all that. And he'd write papers and write books. And he'd go in his study and there'd be stacks of papers. Kind of like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, stuff like that. And uh, and then he got to go places and talk. He'd like they'd offer him to go someplace and they'd offer him a fee, or and he'd be really into that. So, he was a psychologist, teacher, author, all around intellectual, scholarly type. Um, and then the kind of people that take feedback and criticism very well, as you know. So then my mom went back to college, I think when I was in junior high. She went to teachers college in Columbia, and she became a reading teacher, specialist in reading. She had a passion for that. She really loved it.
So, what do you have as like your earliest memories of mom and dad?
Hmm. You know, one of my earliest memories of mom is her making cinnamon toast and cocoa. Those were two things that she made for me that I liked quite a bit. I don't know if you remember the pink mug and the yellow mug. There was a pink mug, a yellow mug, and a pink blanket and a yellow blanket.
Hmm.
And I had the yellow blanket. I still have it somewhere. I
Wow.
have it. Yeah, the little it's just small for me now. And but we each had a mug and a blanket, and they switched the colors on us. But I remember her making me because I had the pink mug, and I remember her making me, hot cocoa and cinnamon toast. Those are like my favorite things in the world. To this day, I try to diet, and the one thing that kills me is anything cinnamon related. Like put some cinnamon roll near me, and I'm like, I'm gonna have a
Yep.
problem.
Yep.
And I remember her in the kitchen, and remember her sewing and doing laundry. And I have memories of Omaha. I remember her being in the basement. I remember being down in the basement, kind of hang around her and stuff. Uh, she was really fun. She was good people, Dad was like, you had to be kind of careful, you know. I mean, he was also a lot of fun. He was to laugh and make jokes and have fun, but there was definitely some rails that you had to stay within. And I have this feeling that I must have lost something early, 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 something like a building block or something, some kind of thing. I lost it or misplaced it. And I think I got, in trouble for that, so, um, but yeah, I remember Dad coming home from work, he'd be in a suit and tie and all that stuff and an overcoat or a hat, and then take off his change into his comfortable clothes and have his drink and relax. But I remember everybody smiling and being happy. I think moving was difficult for us. I think as you and I talk about Omaha, a lot of happy memories, and then moved to St. Louis, and it wasn't a good move. That's when some people started getting unhappy a little bit.
So when you were in school, elementary, middle, high school, what did you like to do? What were some of your things you liked in those different phases of school?
Elementary, middle, and high school. Okay, so elementary school. I like to play. I remember going to people's houses to play. And we used to play outside back in the day. We'd have maybe remember cap guns?
Yeah.
Like guns you could shoot and make a smoking noise a little bit, or maybe we had some kind of plastic toys that some people had swing sets or jungle gyms. So it was a little physical, we'd run around, we would throw the ball around, or there'd be a bigger ball. You would kick the ball, or run tag games. And some people had swings and tire swings. And I remember a lot of the fun was physical. It was just being out and
Hmm.
burning off energy. But I remember like stuff like some of the board games. There were some, but I don't think we like to play the board games as much as we like to be. Like we play Cowboys and Indians or soldiers, and they go run with a toy gun and hide behind the wood pile, make sure that it didn't get captured. It was like real playing, and that was really fun. And then we moved to St. Louis in was it 63 or something,
Yep.
62?
63.
Moved to St. Louis, and I go out on Saturday to look for people to play with, and everybody's in their basement watching TV. It was just a transition. We were living in a suburb of the city in St. Louis, and then some people used to think the city wasn't so safe. In Omaha, we lived in the city, and it wasn't really suburban. It's different. And but in St. Louis, I remember making friends in the neighborhood, and we just kind of run around the neighborhood, and with nothing, maybe play in the schoolyard. There was maybe a sandbox or a swings and things, and There was a guy who gave woodworking lessons in the neighborhood, Buckley, on Saturdays. One of my friends went every Saturday, and I tagged along once, I think. Um, our dad wasn't keen on sending us to paid activity. But I remember going to Mr. Buckley's but when we moved to New Jersey, that's when I started getting more interested in music. I remember I got a snare drum and a cymbal. I remember going to people's houses after school and playing snare and cymbal along with the Kinks record. Remember, I'm so tired of waiting.
Hmm.
So tired. So my friend Peter, I think it was Peter Tenak, he'd play the song through with the record. It was like a little machine with the 45 inch, 45 RPM.
Hmm.
People, younger people don't know. It was a single record spinning a little turntable. And he'd play through it once and put up, and I'd play through it once and he'd play through it again. We had a lot of fun without, too much, nothing was money oriented. And I remember getting into junior high when I was in Boy Scouts and we went to Boy Scout camp, 2 summers. How many camps did you go to?
I think I only went to one summer camp. I did a lot of camping during the school year when I was in the seventh grade.
You went to Novi Bosco one year.
Yeah, 1 year.
I went to Novi Bosco one year and I went to Floodwood Mountain one year.
Okay.
And you know, uh, music got my interest. There was the music explosion, and I liked the rock and roll music, pop music, and I really liked the drums and the drum set. And I played the drums in the orchestra, and you had to take a test. Everyone wanted to bang on the drum. So to get the test, he would give you a rhythm test. And you go, okay, what was his name? Mr. Posner or something?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it'll come back. But anyway, he would give you a test like, okay, and then you'd have to go. And so you do that about 4 or 5 times, and I nailed it. And go, okay, you're the drummer. But some kids didn't have that rhythmic sense. So I enjoyed, music and the drums, and then eventually got pieces of a drum set, a bass drum, and a tom tom, and I had a second cymbal and a hi-hat. And one of my memories of dad was I'd be in the basement. This is now seventh grade or possibly even eighth grade. But I'd be in the basement just slamming away with Led Zeppelin with my headphones. And I'd look up and dad standing in front of me, just freaking out. Stop. I was like, he'd come home from work to me banging the drums, 13-year-old testosterone coming out. And but yeah, um, I must say that I'm a little nostalgic about the way we grew up because I'm seeing how computers are influencing the next generations, and I see it very negatively. I can't help it, and every day I have a daily once or more experience with that, and I see that we it's just that we had to do stuff we couldn't look it up, or they'd say, go look up in the encyclopedia.
You got to high school then. What were your interests then? And you moved again before freshman year.
Well, we moved from New York to St. Louis in that summer before 70, or seven, yeah, it was the summer of 70.
Yeah.
And so now we're back in St. Louis, and I was really coming into my own in New Jersey. I had a lot of friends. I was, really comfortable. And so in a lot of ways, New Jersey was one of my big formative times, third grade through eighth grade. And all my life, people have always thought I had a New York accent. I always thought, you from New York? You're from New York? No, but I was in New York area, very formative time for 6 years. And so we moved back to St. Louis, and that first summer, you and I were just stuck in the house and walking around. I had my drums set up and it was playing the drums, and we'd go outside and walk around. But I got into my freshman year and I quickly joined a band. And then I met other musicians. And so music was always something that I was interested in, and that it was an activity, and it was social too, and I'd meet people. And so, unfortunately, because we'd been in New York through junior high school, when I got back to St. Louis, I was completely out of all the social circles. And there were cliques, there were couples, there was all kinds of stuff. There was bar mitzvahs that had happened. I didn't know so many of the people in my class were actually Jewish. It was only in the last couple of years, some of the people, because I wasn't there during the bar mitzvah time. When I came
Hmm.
back from school, it was high school. And regardless, um, I quickly got interested in the stage band, and that took me into jazz, and then that took me into going to other places outside the high school, like Merrimack Community College or University City High School, where they had other music programs, and then went to music camp and so forth. So just kind of got further and further into the music world.
So when you were coming up to graduate from high school, what were you thinking? Were you thinking that you wanted to go to college or not go to college or go to music school or just go out and seek your fortune?
Well, when I was in high school, I was pursuing drums, and I was totally into being a drummer, jazz, big band, rock, whatever. I was in drums and music, and I played piano secondarily. And what I wanted to do was go to college at either Indiana University or the New England School of Music, those two places. And I also was applied to Berkeley. So I had wanted to go to college for music. I don't know how that would have flown. There was no funds. I don't think, I think that's another story, but I think we used some of my college money to go to Interlochen. And so,
Uh,
but I mean, the general plan for me was I would go to one of those good music schools
mhm.
and get into music.
Yeah.
And University was the most appealing, but unfortunately, I didn't keep my grades up enough to get in out of state. If I had been in Indiana resident, I would have gotten in, but because I was out of state, I didn't get in.
Hmm.
And I didn't get into New England either. I don't remember what that was based on, but that was a very that's where my friend Marty Ehrlich went, but New England Conservatory was a little, well, what about New England and Conservatory doesn't sound uppity. So I didn't get in there, but I got into Berkeley as a drummer. I got accepted to Berkeley, so I could have gone to Berkeley as a drummer, but there was a funny thing happened around that time is that I was starting to get offers to play gigs on keyboards, which I really didn't want to do, but then I realized this is the world, like, the world saying, "Hey, we'll hire you and pay you money to play keyboards," and I'm like, well, maybe I should try that. So I tried that, and I was just starting to play regularly in St. Louis and make money and be well received. It wasn't just that I was making money, like everybody liked my playing and liked me, and I was getting popular within the little music world, and so it dawned on me like maybe to go to Berkeley as a drummer didn't sound, Berkeley's in Boston, Berkeley School of Music, didn't sound like it made the sense, because my career was starting to go into keyboard. And so I got the impression that Berkeley just accepted people, because they needed students. I wasn't necessarily going to have a lot of students there, and maybe I wasn't going to get much out of it, which is, by the way, has been verified.
Hmm.
That's what they were taking all kinds of people, and you're just kind of on your own. They're collecting the money, and
Hmm.
they're not necessarily getting a lot of great at that time. But let's just say I was one of the best drummers, it would have probably been a good experience for me. But I had met a drummer at that time in California that senior year named Carlos Vega, who was in a championship band from Eagle Rock, was part of why I ended up in Los Angeles. And I had met him and I'd heard about him because I was a drummer and my friends told me about Carlos and he was a rival drummer. And then when he came to St. Louis, we were playing. I was already starting to play as a keyboard player, so he came down and sat in with me, and I thought he was amazing. And we played really well together too. And he really liked my key. We hit it off, but it seemed like, well, he's a really great drummer. I'm starting to work on keyboards. Everybody's saying we want you to play keyboards. I'm not getting into these schools, but I got into Berkeley on drums. So something told me like maybe don't go to Berkeley. But what happened was that summer after high school, I worked out at Six Flags, which is an amusement park, connected to other amusement parks like Magic Mountain and stuff. And so I played out there in the little production that they had. And as the summer was going forward, I had thought about maybe just moving out into the city of St. Louis into an apartment. I just wanted to get out of the house and start my life as an adult and all this kind of stuff because I was working and I was making money. But then something told me that maybe it would be great to get out of town and just go to New York. I hadn't really considered Los Angeles seriously, but I had met a couple people from Los Angeles. Carlos was one, and I met another group of guys that were playing on the road that were based in Los Angeles. They were originally from St. Louis, and that was a guy named Don Cunningham. And he had gone to school at Solvang High School in St. Louis, same class as Donny Hathaway. He had been on the road for years. He's kind of like a Johnny Mathis style singer, and he had a show that traveled all over. And his musicians were from St. Louis. And long story short, they lived in LA. And so between Carlos and them, I knew people in LA. So it was like a new idea. But New York was always considered the place to go to make it as a jazz musician. So it was kind of like a fantasy to go to New York. And then one day, my friend that I met said he was moving to LA. My friend Richard Tokat, who was an older percussionist and from St. Louis, played the conga drums, and I had met him in the clubs, and he said, I'm going to move to LA. And I just said, can I come with you? It was like without any thought. So it was kind of a fluke. So I never went to college. And like I said, I got accepted at Berkeley, but something told me it wasn't the right path. And I'm glad that I stayed on the keyboards. I've had a great 51 years or 52 years playing keyboards, and I love playing keyboards. And nobody asked me to play drums.
Later on, you did go back and study the piano. What? Tell me about that.
Well, I came out to California and I had to prove. See, there was a whole thing going on within my family. So my father, our father, uh, was very reluctant to support the idea of me being in the arts. He really had issues, and I understood why that he didn't feel he could support that. So there was a conflict. And there was another conflict that our older sister, who had been very, very into piano and classical music and pursued it at the university and at the, what do you call that, graduate level.
Mhm.
What do you call that when you're above bachelor's?
Yeah, graduate levels, right?
Post postgraduate or whatever they call it. And she didn't particularly care for what I was doing, and she was kind of against it, or she was against it. And my father, so it was like I wasn't in a situation that was nurturing or encouraging me to do my music, which I honestly believe that music was my gift and my skill and it's what I'm supposed to do. But they didn't get that for different reasons, and so it was very difficult a scenario. And it became like I had to prove. It was like I had, in order to do what I had to do, I almost had to leave home and prove. So I had a different kind of trajectory than other people. um I you know I went to LA on a mission that I have to survive at all costs. And so a lot of times I would compare it in my mind to my grandfather coming from the old country to the States and working, trying to survive, just trying to survive. You live a lower level. Like I didn't have a stereo in my car. I didn't have a TV. I lived on peanut butter and bread, and stuff. But it's like I was determined to try because I had had success in St. Louis. I said, let me see if I can do this in LA. So I got some gigs here and there and this and that, met some people and, some ups and downs. And then at one point, I started my band because I couldn't find, this is a long roundabout answer to your question. I started
Mhm.
my band because I wanted to play the music that I wanted to play, and I couldn't find opportunities to play it. So I better start my own. And people at that time, a lot of the young musicians in the valley and stuff, they have these garages that the carpet and electricity and stuff, and they would jam and get together and jam. And I get invited to jam with people. That was kind of how I met people. We're gonna jam on Saturday. Okay, and show up with my electric piano and jam with them. They, oh man, if you played here, if you played there. So I heard about a place and I called them up and I got the gig there and we started playing there. We became very popular with our band, and then we got discovered by this guy, Willie Bobo, who was pretty established, played all the big rooms in town. He had a role on the Cosby Show. He had, a long story about Willie Bobo, but he was like professional, major leagues. So we got that job, and then 6 months later, I got the job with Freddie Hubbard through making more connections and pursuing and being persistent. So I got the job with Freddie Hubbard, and I thought, man, I'm there. This is like one of my lifelong goals. I'm playing with one of the top people, my heroes. I mean, I've done it all. And then I got to record with him. I wrote songs. He recorded my songs. I thought I was going to be like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And what happened was I got Carlos Vega on that Freddie Hubbard gig in the end after we recorded with them and toured a bit. And Carlos always studied with a teacher, and I didn't. I was like, I'm so cool. And then it started to dawn on me that I could benefit from finding a teacher the way Carlos had. Carlos studied with Ralph Humphrey, who was one of the top session guys in LA, really schooled, really professional, played on all kinds of stuff. And before Ralph passed a couple of years ago, he was on that show Dancing with the Stars. He had played with, Natalie Cole, all kinds of people, I mean, he had a great career. He was a studio guy. But Carlos studied with him and he was improving his skills. So I decided to do the same thing. And I found Terry Trotter, who is the piano version of Ralph Humphrey. Wonderful pianist, wonderful person. And I started studying with him around, I think I was 22 or something like that. So I'd already been in the big time, but now I said, and so you visited me at that time. I started studying with Terry and I had to practice every day. That was the deal. You had to practice every day. Um, and I was trying to really get my skills together. I really felt like I needed to catch up now because I'm older, and I want to catch up on the piano and on my skills and everything. Because Terry kind of showed me in the beginning of my lessons how much I could learn. Like, uh, when I'm being facetious, he had me do things that I couldn't do, so I fell on my face because that's how you learn,
Mhm.
Instead of just going, "Oh, you're great. Oh, that's great." He was like, "Play this," and I would just like fall apart. And so I had a really wonderful relationship with Terry. He was a mentor, became a friend. He's just on the end of his life now. He's up in Vegas in assisted living. I saw him less than a year ago, he's really having a hard time with the health situations. But he really, it was great. And you were out there, and I was studying, and I wanted to really study, and I had to go out and work and do gigs too, and it was really hard to keep it all going. And I remember you saying at that time that you thought that dad should help out and I should be able to spend some years just studying and not have to worry so much about supporting myself. And I was really thrilled when you said that. And then I thought that, this is going to be great because you have good pull with dad. And then we came back to St. Louis and we talked about it. And dad was like, no go. He was very determined that, I had to have a real college degree um, a real college degree in liberal arts, like, and I gotta tell you something. After all these years, I can tell you something. I believe something really bad happened to me in my schooling because I was always told that I was a great reader. When I was very young, I could read and say the all the syllables, the sounds. I could make the sounds of the words, but I was pushed to go beyond my comprehension. I could read words, but I couldn't comprehend them.
Hmm.
And in the third, second, third, fourth, oh, say first, second, third grade, I was all A's and all that stuff and reading. And then in fourth grade, it started to get weird because, and the teachers were, it became a thing. But what I know now is that I have tremendous trouble comprehending what I read. And so I would have had problems with this liberal arts college and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had problems studying. I go in my room with the books and I'd read the words, and it's just like pouring water down a drain. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's like that with me today. 68 years old. And when I'm reading something, I have to read it over and over and over and over to really get what's there.
You mentioned a couple of your heroes and some people that you worked for, starting with Willie and Bobo and then Freddie Hubbard. Tell us some of the other highlights of your career following that.
Well, uh, you know, well, just two things. When I never knew who Willie Bobo was before I came to California, but Freddie Hubbard was one of the aspirations I had was to play with Freddie. But uh, you learn, like since I met Willie and worked with him, I found out more about where he came from and why he was important and everything. And he was very important. He was the guy that recorded Evil Ways. Carlos Santana did a cover of Willie Bobo's Evil Ways, and that made a career for Carlos Santana.
Hmm.
Willie, Willie's quite a trip, and but I didn't know who he was in the beginning, but then, now I do. And Freddie was a lifelong ambition. I it was quite interesting, after the Freddie Hubbard experience, I started trying to get involved in the studio work and then touring because a lot of my friends were touring, with rock bands and playing big concerts, and they were making lots of money. And, my focus started to shift because jazz was kind of a poor existence, and after a while, I was like, let me see, there's a couple of things that happened with Freddie Hubbard too that caused me to want to turn away from jazz. So I think one of my next things was Boz Scaggs. So he was one of the big touring groups with Silk Degrees and all that, and played giant places, and big band, paid everybody well. And I got that gig, was excited about that, and it was fun. I stayed in touch with Boz and worked with him on and off for years. And in fact, I just saw him just months ago at a memorial for a friend of ours, and I didn't recognize him. He was standing there. He had a name tag and he had a hat on. It says, I'm like musician with Boz Skaggs. And I looked at him like, you played with Boz? And he said, David, I am Boz. Um, but I had a lot of fun in the studio, playing with people. Like I played on the record for Spinal Tap. I came into the studio. Um, I walked into a room, there's a bunch of guys sitting around, and I walk out of the room, I walk to another room, I want to come back into the room with the guys sitting around, and I go, guys, do you know what room Spinal Tap's in? And they were Spinal Tap. They were just, they couldn't believe it. They were like, it was a complete Spinal Tap moment because I didn't recognize them. We're like, I had no idea. And so that was fun. And I stayed uh, in touch a little bit with Harry Shearer. I think he's a genius. I don't know how much you're familiar with him. He used to have a great radio show every week I'd listen to religiously called Le Show. But Rat, the heavy metal band, I got to play on the Rat record. I love that the song is called Loving You's a Dirty Job, but someone's got to do it. And I played on Cher record. She wasn't there, but it's on one of her records. It was a good song. Um, World Without Heroes, I think it's called. Um, but I got involved playing on the Fame TV show. I had a lot of fun with that. And I never knew anything about that high school in New York. The music and arts and performing arts. There was two high schools, music and art and performing arts. And I think now they've merged into one. But over the years, many of my friends have come out of there. And so I got to learn a lot more about it. And the movie Fame, did you see that movie?
Yeah.
Great movie. But when it came out, I didn't know anything about the backstory about the schools, but um, did the TV show, and I used to do some of the keyboard stuff for the keyboard player. His name was Bruno in the show. And then eventually he wanted to play. He was a piano. Lee Carreri was the actor. He played some keyboards. He eventually got his way in, and then I got pushed out. But you know, it was, I worked with so many different people in so many weird circumstances. And, just trying, the whole thing was to survive in the beginning, was like, I didn't have the encouragement or the support, to be in music. So it made me be a little bit more aggressive, and a little bit more cutthroat. Although I never was that cutthroat, but what I mean is like, it was do or die. So when I'd play with everything I got. So I gravitated up to an echelon of players that were really top players, and they accepted me. They liked playing with me. And so it was great. And a lot of cool things. But we got involved in producing records and, like projects for foreign artists and things. And they'd give us a bunch of money to go in the studio, and we'd hire all our friends and we'd record, and just liked making music, being in the studio. Touring was a lot more work. If you go to the studio, you show up there in the morning, come home at night. Touring, some groups would go out for 3 months at a time. And but I lived it all. I mean, I remember when my buddies were with Olivia Newton-John, and they went 3 or 4 month tour, and then Joni Mitchell or whoever, James Taylor, different tours, Sting, Jeff Beck. But my thing was, I got with George Benson in the late 80s, and I was 29, and George was 44. So he's 15 years older than me. So he's not like a father, but he's like an older brother. But got with George, and he was coming off of his real top heyday. Well, you came to a lot of those concerts, Pine
Mhm.
Knob, and a lot of those big places. We played Wolf Trap Farm Park and Hollywood Bowl or Carnegie Hall. I mean, top of the line places. And so I enjoyed that for years. And then, I was with him, and then I took a break for 10 years, was back with him and so forth. So, I just have to say that I've been extremely lucky to get to play and know the most talented people on the planet. I mean, it's very, very humbling when you realize, that you got to play with these people and be a part of their musical world, and so many other people would have liked to have.
Indeed. Well, I've certainly been to a lot of your concerts over the years, starting with Freddie Hubbard in Chicago, and then Freddie Hubbard
Definitely.
in Madison, and then George Benson, dozens of times all over the country. So it's been a great pleasure to come see you play. And when we come out to California, we got to see you a couple times. And so that's been a blessing. When you're not playing music, what do you like to do?
Play music. No, I'm it's interesting. I have uh recently I just really enjoy movies and TV shows. That's really easy and fun. I always like to go to places like museums and like the California Science Center or the Reagan Library. They've got a thing on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I love things like that. I love to travel. I love to be out by the water too. That's one of my favorite things. Just if I'm just near the water, it's beautiful. It's I don't need any activities. I mean, I did like to do certain physical activities, but I've had some physical issues in the last couple of years that's inhibiting that. But like, I used to do yoga regularly. I used to like to body surf, get in the water and body surf. Really love going to Hawaii and of course being in California, we have great beaches and everything. I like cooking, but I like to cook for people. I don't like to cook just for
Mhm.
myself. But um another thing, I'm very like traveling and visiting friends and family and stuff.
Well, switching now to the five topic areas of books, food, music, sports, and humor. Do you like to read? And if so, what do you like to read?
I don't have any time to read. I've got stacks of books. A lot of my friends have written books now. It's just
Hmm.
stacks. And yeah, I must say that there was a time that I really liked audiobooks.
Hmm.
And I used to listen to them all. I mean, it's like the technology, it's so demoralizing to me. I have a whole library of books on tape and all kinds of speakers on tapes. And just get in the car and pop a tape in and boom. And they don't have tapes in cars now. Like I'm gonna have to like create some kind of, digital, I have to
Yeah.
create some kind of library. But it's like it's unfortunate um about for me, I'll just kind of come back to that. But I like we're in a world now where it used to be so easy to make your own audio programs, make your own mixtapes or, get buy books on tape or borrow or, you know what I mean? And you can just put it in and listen to it. But now it's almost like now with the digital world, they want to feed you like, well, this, you might like this, or it's like they're taking away the ability to just say, I want to get what I want. I want to listen to what I want to listen to. So, um, I'm, and then I'm going to tell you that when I did have the time to go out to the desert, I really could read. I would float around. There's this one place I used to go in the desert with this hot tub called Two Bunch Palms, where everybody would get in the hot pool and they would read. And there was a sign that said, shh, it's a quiet zone. Everybody be reading their books. And I spent 2 or 3 days out there and I read several books out there and I had really enjoyed it. And then in recent times, with our technology and the culture changing, whenever I go out there, it's filled with people on their phones making noise. And I haven't read a book in that pool, for years now. So the good news is, I do still read, but I like to read certain magazines and things. And
Hmm.
but I much prefer books on tape. I'm gonna have to figure out how to get access because I was just thinking about this. I was doing a bunch of driving. And I'm like, I don't have any access to my books or speakers. I have a lot of speakers on tapes.
You mentioned TV. I know you like to watch different TV series. What's the series that you watched multiple times that has like thousands of episodes?
Ertugrul and Osman. It's an amazing story of the precursor to the formation of the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, it's wonderful. So yeah, I discovered it because I've been fascinated. It's been going on for a while. I've been fascinated by Jerusalem. There was a special on CNN about Jerusalem and 10 episodes about over the history. It's been under different controls. There's been battles for it. Then there's been certain leaders that have had interfaith cooperations and stuff. So through that, I started watching different things about that and then Constantinople. And then I found this show, and it's about the Kai tribe, Kai, Kai. And they basically originally come from the further east, like Turkmenistan and those areas. That's Turkey, Turkmenistan. They travel. towards Greece and all that. And so they're tribal and it's fascinating. I love that show. In the first series, the first season, their enemies are the Templars, the Templar Knights, and they clash. And then the next series, they run into the Mongolians and they're clashing with the Mongolians. And then it's quite interesting. I've watched it several times and it's all in Turkish, so you got to watch the subtitles. I'll tell you a funny story. If I'm watching my Turkish show in subtitles, I can't watch it with the audio muted. It doesn't sound right with no audio. I got to hear the
Yeah.
sounds.
Yeah. So what do you like to eat?
When?
What do you like? What do you enjoy eating?
Well, I love so many foods. That's it's a problem now. I'm having to really get very conservative now. I've just decided to go on a very rigid diet, but I love pizza. I love deli food. I love chicken soup, matzo balls, lox and bagels, pastrami, so forth. I love great steak. I love Middle Eastern food, like, sometimes, and I love Cuban food. I'm not such a big Mexican food person. Here in LA, it's funny. I have a few friends that love to get Mexican all the time. It's like I rarely ever want to get Mexican food. I always defer to Cuban. But sushi is my favorite food. Raw fish or sushi or Japanese, I could eat that all the time. And then I like good Chinese food. I like every kind of food.
Yep.
However, I'm kind of having to go uh, rigid now. It's the body doesn't process as well.
Yeah.
So I just decided no more pizza, no more bread, no more
Yeah.
potatoes, no more rice, no more pasta, no more donuts, no more pie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
I
like
do. I
me,
do.
not sushi. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to try to do that from here on out. But I'm going to say I'm going to have one night a week where I can just have
Yeah.
anything.
That
If
sounds
I can't keep it to one night, then it's going to have to be 0 nights.
well. I hope you can make that work. But I have to thank you. You're the one that introduced me to a lot of those cuisines for the first time when I came out and visited you in the 70s. And back in St. Louis, then we didn't really have a lot of ethnic restaurants that had come into existence. So when you took me out for the Thai food, the Japanese food, Chinese food, Mexican food, Leo's for barbecue, all of these things that you introduced me to, I would come back to St. Louis and say, well, where's a Thai restaurant? But fortunately now the world's caught up, but LA was beyond where we were in St. Louis, and you were on the forefront of letting me discover a lot of great food.
Well, now there's like 3 Thai restaurants on every block. But the thing about it was a process because it was the end of the Vietnam War, and people were coming. You know what I mean? There's been all kinds of immigrations. And I remember the Vietnamese, they do the nail business here. All the nail salons are Vietnamese, but what it started, and with the Thai food too. And then um, you mentioned the barbecue. I love great barbecue. And besides that, Indian food. I love Indian food. There's such great food everywhere in Thai. You didn't even mention Thai food. Thai food
I
is
did mention it, and you said you had them three on a block. So, in any case, I'm going to switch now to music. I think you have lots to say about music, but what was the first record that you ever bought?
I don't remember. It could have been the Green Hornet.
Ah, okay.
The Hornet?
Yeah, that was
Al
Al Hurt.
could have been.
Okay.
No, what I was saying about Thai food is I didn't mention Thai food when I said
Oh, I got you.
Thai. And I do like it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, and Vietnamese too.
So, what was the last concert that you were at?
The last concert I was at wasn't that long ago. Uh, I'm going to a concert next week. The um, well, I went to a concert I went to the Mint to see this Angela Petrilli. Is it club count or
Sure.
yeah, I went to see Angela Petrilli, who's a young female guitarist, vocalist. Uh, went to see her, yeah. There's a place called the Mint. It's over 100 years old. I don't know if you've heard of it. They do a lot of blues. It's one of LA's, music venues.
So when we were young, we used to like getting records together. Used to go over to Englewood and buy records. We got records from Record Club of America. We try out bands we never heard of. But do you have a favorite album from all the years you've loved music?
It's hard to have a favorite album. There's so many great albums.
Yeah,
King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King is one of the top albums of all time. And when, I owned it, I bought it just because of the cover
yeah.
and loved it. And then in the music on there, there's a song that has some flute solos. That's kind of what got me interested in jazz. It's
Ah,
all kind of interesting. Oh yeah, there's a song called "I Talk to the Wind" on
yeah.
that.
I love that song. I
Yeah,
love that
great.
record.
And then of course Greg Lake was in the band. So then when Emerson, Lake and Palmer came out, I
Mhm.
was into, got me into them.
Yeah.
They were, Keith Emerson was basically trying to be Oscar Peterson. We didn't know it at the time. You listen back with the knowledge I have, it's like, oh my God, Keith Emerson was just wanting to be a jazz piano player,
Yeah.
and then he became successful as a rock. He did a lot of theatrics. The There's so many great albums. Nights in White Satin, I'd say, is one of the top albums. I could listen to that album over and over and over, especially this song Tuesday Afternoon and Nights in White Satin. Just those two songs are
Yeah.
so. But I listened to the whole album. I listened to the whole album. Um, Abbey Road is one of my favorites. Of course, Sergeant Pepper's isn't bad either. Which one do you like better, Sergeant Pepper's or Abbey Road?
Sergeant Pepper, I think. It was such an important record, and we got introduced to it one song at a time on the radio back in '67. And
Yeah.
they'd say, "Here's another one," and so it just became this big event. And so it's just almost every single song that I ended up liking. I think in part because of how it was introduced, but also because they're great songs.
Well, I just got to throw this in there. You asked about a concert. I'm going to a concert a week from Friday. My friend Carlos Vega's daughter has become an artist, and we didn't really know how big it was, but I just looked up her information, and she's doing really well. She's touring, she has a record deal. Her song has over 1 million streams.
Wow.
No, I'm telling you. And unfortunately, he's been gone for 27 years, but we're going to go see her Friday night. And she sings beautifully. She's got great music.
What's her name?
She goes by the name of Minnie Trees.
Okay.
That's the name of her artist name.
Got it. Got it.
I
So
go to a lot of concerts.
switching to sports, I know you probably don't follow sports as closely now, but at one time you did. I remember when you got into Rangers hockey when we lived in New York more than I did. But do you follow any sports these days or not?
No, I don't. I don't follow any sports. It's funny. I have a Dodgers jersey and a
Mhm.
Dodgers hat, and I'll wear them often because just to be LA, And I like my. Everybody was like, "Oh, you're a Dodger fan? Going to the game?" Like, no. Or they start talking to me about the game or the score. I'm like, I'm just wearing the shirt. But we actually have tickets to go to the Dodgers next week on Monday. They're playing the Rockies. To my friend, Dodgers are one of his clients. He works for them, and you know, it's hard for me. It's weird, like we're talking back to like activities and books and everything in sports. The way my music kind of works, it kind of it's hard for me to follow a lot of other stuff. I kind of have to ebb and flow. It's not like I'm a workaholic or anything, but there's a lot going on, and so if it's going to get done, I can't be like, well, tonight is the game. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's weird. I'm doing a lot of recording right now, and it's always very time consuming.
I recall you mentioned about playing board games. I don't know if you remember, but you and I used to play a board game called
Challenge the
Challenge the Yankees. You remember playing that all the time?
Yankees. You never let me win.
It was an intense period. We'd play that like hours and hours at a time. All right. So final category is humor. Do you have a favorite comedian or a comedy film or a TV show or anything funny?
Well, I have a friend who I think is a wonderful comedian. His name is Alonzo Bowden, and look him up on YouTube and stuff. He's professional, like he's done all the major shows and does a lot of the music cruises. What I love about Alonzo is he doesn't swear. He can be funny without having to MF everybody, you
Mm.
know? And I really admire that. Like I know him through another group of people, and he used to be an airline mechanic, but he became a professional comedian and it started taking off for him. And I've known him for like the last 30 years. His career's taken off. He was on the thing Last Comic Standing and stuff like that. And took off. And I'd see him sometimes. He was he would open the show when I'd play with certain jazz artists. And we played one time I was with David Sanborn, and Alonzo got up there and he just had me dying of laughter. He was pulling David Sanborn apart, and nothing was anything that had to be profanity. It
Yeah.
was just so funny. He's just a funny guy. So recently, last year, I did a show and celebrating 50 years of being in LA, and I wanted him to announce the show, and he was doing a different show that night and couldn't do it. So we got him to do a videotape and put the video up to announce my show. But I'd say he's my favorite comedian. He's as funny as anybody. Um, yeah.
So among the people that you know, who's the best at making you laugh and who are you able to crack up?
No, I don't know. I'm I get some pretty good jokes out there. I can't keep track of it. I was just recently I was wherever I was people were oh I was yeah I was spent I just came back from a little trip I spent last night with some friends and a gentleman and his wife, and I kept cracking them up. I kept, it's just
Yeah.
it's nice to be humorous, especially if you're not doing it at anybody's expense,
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're not trying. The other thing is not trying so hard. Our dad used to try so hard to make it's just kind of natural. They're there waiting for you.
Well, now we come to the time where I'd like to ask you to tell a story of your choosing. Do you have a story you could share with us?
Um, any story?
Any story.
Well, let's see. Um, Here's one. I was at the hot springs that we have down in Koreatown, and it's this beautiful spa hot springs where you go sit in the water and get steam and everything. And in the locker room, and I noticed Larry Fishburne in there, Lawrence Fishburne, and he was, and after a while, I went up to him and I said, you look a lot like Lawrence Fishburne. He cracked up. He says, yeah, I get that all the time. Um, but the other story is not quite as flattering as when George Harrison came to the show. I was playing at this club with Emil Richards and Joe Porcaro, and Emil had been part of the concert at Bangladesh with George Harrison. So George came down to see him, and he brought his wife with him. And we finished playing. We're on the break. They were sitting somewhere. We all lined up to say hi to him. And I got up to the table where George Harrison and his wife were sitting, and I said, and he goes, "Oh, we really enjoyed your music." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." And then we go to look to his wife, and I said, "Patty?" And she said, "No, Olivia." Okay. Because there was a very famous thing about Patty Harrison, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that was
Well, tell me about the time that Ringo was in the studio where you were.
Well, that was a different scenario. I was recording at Capitol. I was actually mixing at Capitol Studios 3. They have three, they're closed now, but they had three studios. And he was in B, I was in C. I've done a lot of my recording in A and B for my records and stuff, but he was in B doing something. There was a young artist in there. I forget his name now, who they were putting behind, and then they had some people from the Heartbreakers. They had different people in there, and Ringo was in there, and Jim Keltner, two drummers, and so he kind of we went in there, and it was really great because he saw me, he kind of knows me, and he gave me a big hug and made me feel really cool and everything. And then we went back on my side working on our mix. And then at some point, the door opens up and Ringo comes walking into our room. And I was mixing the song Fragile, the Sting song. And he came in and he goes, and it was jazzy. And he goes, "What's all this jazz? What's all this?" And then before I wanted to say, well, like, well, sit, have a seat. Let me play you some. Before I could even think of anything, he had come in, said all that, and had left the room before I could even figure out to say, sit down, you know. But that same day, Steve Perry, the lead singer from Journey, was also hanging out, and somehow he ended up in my room hanging out with me. And then he kept telling me, "You should try this or you should do this." I'm like, "What do you think you are, lead singer for Journey?" I mean, and then, but the other thing that was so weird about that day was that I had a guy make these shirts for. Actually, he made these shirts and jackets for me. And I told him to come to the studio to bring the shirts and that he could hang out. I even got him a parking space, which is really hard to do at Capitol. It's a very prestigious thing. And this guy, he didn't get it. Like he could have been hanging out there watching all this go down, you know, but it was weird. Like he just thought he was dropping off some swag. He didn't realize he was going to get to meet Ringo or anything. So he came, dropped off the shirts and left. And then Ringo came in and I gave him a shirt, but I didn't have one small enough for him, you know. So I got to make an extra small shirt for him.
What about the time that Eric Clapton came to see you at the Baked Potato?
Well, they didn't let him in. That was another story. We got lots and lots of stories, but that was unfortunate. Yeah, that was what that was is that our bass player was joining Eric Clapton's band and Eric was coming to the show, but he came to the first set instead of the second, and he had four people, and it was maxed out. There was no place for him to go. So what are you gonna do?
Right, right. Well, I'm going to conclude by telling a story about you. And this, I could tell a lot of stories, obviously, from our growing up together, but this is one that I remember from when I was a freshman at Northwestern. And I had tried to go on the air with a little 100 milliwatt transmitter in the dorms, but that didn't work out so well. So I asked you to come up with mom and dad and bring the big transmitter that we had used for our radio station in St. Louis, KFR. So you came up with that and we installed it, but we needed to put up the antenna. And as you mentioned, you like to climb, which I did not like to do. So you said you would climb up in a tree there on the shores of Lake Michigan and run this 100-foot long wire between two trees. That particular day, it was pretty windy and the trees were swaying and you're up there in the tree and I'm a little worried that are you going to be able to stay up there and get this thing done? But you did. You got that.
Worried about whether I could get the antenna up, not about whether I could fall and
That's
jump.
right. As long as you got the job done, that's what counted.
There you go. You were worried about the antenna.
So you did that, but you
Did we
did
get a
that at
picture?
all.
Wasn't there a picture of me up in that tree? I think there was a
There
picture.
might have been, yeah. You did that for all of our radio station locations in Tenafly and in Clayton and in Northwestern. Remember when you were up once on the roof in Tenafly with a hammer because you're going to put up an antenna? You dropped the hammer and it fell down on an old picture tube that was sitting by the side of the house and it imploded.
So it was like, whatever you do, don't break the picture tube. It's going to be a disaster. And then the hammer, don't drop the hammer. And so the hammer slipped out. But you know, on a roof, there's a slant,
Yep, yep.
and there's a slope. So the hammer went down and then it hit the next one, went straight down with the slope, went straight onto the picture tube. blew up.
Well, we certainly had a lot of great times together. We still do, and we got look forward to you coming to play here in Detroit in November, playing at Cranbrook in the library on a legendary Steinway grand piano. But tell us if somebody wants to find out about more about your music, about where you're going to be performing, or how to get any of your music. How can they go about doing that?
DavidGarfield.com. Everything's there. All the links, schedules, shops, YouTubes, mailing lists, just davidgarfield.com.
That's pretty easy. And when is your next gig?
My next gig right now is going to be in New York on October 1st at the bitter end. We're going to do something there. Um, you know, it's been a busy year. There's been a lot going on. It takes a lot to do the live gigs. And the thing about it is, once you do the gig, it's just that's it. It's over. You just play the music, it's done. So I did a lot of live shows this year, and I'm trying to put some more energy into recording, and also I'm conjuring up a video thing that we're going to do a video recording of us playing, and because those things, unlike a live show, can live on, you know.
Mhm.
I just did a an instrumental version of a Stevie Ray Vaughan song featuring Joe Bonamassa, a great guitar player, and it's supposed to come out into September, and we're just waiting for have to get an official letter from his people to show our distributor that we have his permission. So that I always got stuff to do. I'm in the studio tomorrow and the next day, and but working with some great people, and uh, we're going to go down to Nashville in the end of October and do a special show down there. So it's busy. It's just a
Yeah.
lot. A lot of work has to go into these things. People don't realize the back work to do a show. You
So
know.
if you're in New York, check David out at the bitter end. And if you're in Nashville, check out what he's going to do there. And then if you're in Detroit area, November 1st at Cranbrook at 6 p.m., I think is the time of your show there.
They have not given me the official. The reason you don't see it on my websites and newsletters is, well, I put it on the website, so davidgarfield.com, but they haven't really given me the final title of there was a thing about titling the show,
Okay.
what it's supposed to be called,
Yeah.
and I'm still waiting
All right.
to hear. But
Well,
it's going to happen. It's
it's
going to
going to
happen.
happen. It's going to happen. We're going to be there. We look forward to it.
I'm
David,
going to
thanks
do a
so
Billy
much for
Joel. I'm going to do a Billy Joel. After I play, I'm going to knock the piano over, flip it over.
hopefully not. Well, thank you for spending the time with us today. Thank you for being a great brother for the past 68 years. And we look forward to seeing you when you come to Detroit.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you for having me, and good luck with all these ventures. And we'll see you soon. And thanks everybody for listening.